I shake my head no and couch on the stool next to his. Jada squats down in front of us, legs spread wide as I rest my hand on his thigh. Are you a big man? I press my shoulder into his chest. Are you a real man? He pulls out a roll of bills and I laugh. Jada turns around and kneels, and I can't believe that worked, so I laugh as she makes her ass dance in front of his face. Taking a bill, I slide it up Jada's thigh and over the smooth swell of her hip, plucking the thin string of her thong and letting it snap against her skin. He leans back and hands me another bill. He tells me to do it again. Jada looks over her shoulder at me as I slide the bill down her back, dragging my nails along her skin, and I glance at him. Is this what you want? I reach the soft dip between her cheeks and I drag the bill down, like this, kneading her ass with my thumb, and he takes my hand, then shoves the bill in her thong, impatient and rough. In one smooth twirl, Jada turns around, sweat pooling between her breasts, and looks him over. Taking in his tight shirt and young face and hands still smooth as new glass. He looks fresh to the scene, like he's enjoying his first big night. She glances at me and smirks. Wiping the sweat from her forehead, she makes as though she's about to leave. The dance hall booms down to my bones as I take my hand off his thigh and follow her lead. He pulls out 4 crisp bills. Jada grins and drops back down as I rest my hand on his chest. She takes a full shot glass from a waitress, then squeezes it between her breasts. Mouth open, he leans forward as my feet turn cold and my hands start to burn, so, grinning, I shove him back in his seat and plop my ass on his lap. Jada watches him as I lean forward and close my lips around the cool glass. Laughing, he rubs my back and throws the bills at Jada's feet. He's enjoying it. So, she grabs me by the throat, yanking the glass from my mouth, and she kisses me. Brap, brap. She traces my lips with her tongue, and I hear people cheer. I hear the man behind me yell, "Go day, gal," as bills flutter against the back of my neck. Good girl, Jada murmurs as she presses her palm against my face, then shoves me away. Laughing, he catches me. Jada picks up each bill slowly, staying near me as he digs his hand into my hips like he might not let me go. Aye, gal, Marcus calls to me. Come drink. He signals to a guard who pries me off the man's lap, then steers me through the crowd to the bar. How you do, sweetie, Marcus says. So. My hand shaking, I down a shot of JB's and turn towards the dressing room. Marcus looks at the man I left sitting by the stage. You not finish? He says to me. I cut my eye and kiss my teeth as Marcus chuckles, waving to the guard to take me upstairs. Jada stands up, calves glistening in tall heels. She runs her hand over her thighs, then rests her fists on her waist. She's panting. It's nearly 1 a.m. She's been on since 9. But 1 a.m. means it's the end of her shift. She drops her smile, shoulders caving forward with exhaustion. I slip beyond the double doors as Jada sways her hips once, twice, then turns to leave. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina, for kicking us off, showing us how it's done, pageantry style. And I'm embarrassed to say that like 2 months ago, I arrived late to a reading where Christina was in the lineup and missed her. So I'm very glad that I arrived on time this evening. A slight improvement. All right, on to our next reader. Serkan Gorkemli is originally from Turkey. He's the author of Grassroots Literacies, Lesbian and Gay Activism in Turkey, and Sweet Tooth and Other Stories, which I believe he'll be reading from tonight. He lives in New York with his spouse, Jeremy. Is Jeremy here? Hi. Thanks for coming. And their beloved feline companion, Leonardo. Is Leonardo here? All right, maybe next time. All right, here's Serkan.
Thank you. Wow, there are so many people here. Hi, everybody. Before I begin, I just want to say thank you to Melanie and Eliana for organizing this event. Also, many thanks to Center for Fiction for having me. It's an honor to be here. And I also want to say congratulations to my fellow authors on your published books or forthcoming books, and I look forward to reading them. So it's great to be here. So I'll talk about my book a little bit briefly. So it's called Sweet Tooth and Other Stories. It's a collection of LGBTQ short fiction based in Turkey. It follows 4 characters across 9 stories and takes place from the 1980s all the way to 2010s. And the particular story I'm going to read today is the title story, Sweet Tooth. And I want to mention a couple of things before I get into it. Why did I write this story? I think one of my intentions was to draw attention to LGBTQ issues in the international context. 3 countries, cultures referenced in the story is the US, Turkey, and Japan. The other reason, you can tell from the title, one of the messages I wanted to put out there, this follows a couple of college students in the early 1990s. And one of the things I wanted to say as a simple message is that being queer LGBTQ+ is sweet, and that we should all delight in it. And that is what I'm trying to say in this story. All right, so as I mentioned, this story is about a couple of college students. For any of you who hooked up or messed around with your friends, you know how awkward it gets the next day. So this is the next day. Over the course of the weekend, he realized this unnamed state was his new normal. He felt freshly grounded and exhilarated, like visiting a place for the first time, yet feeling at home. But he knew he couldn't confide in his cousins or anyone else, which made him feel unmoored. Late Sunday night, he took the municipal bus back to campus. The midway point of the 2-hour trip was crossing the Boğaziçi Bridge, which soared from Asia to Europe, high above the dark waters of the Bosphorus Strait, flanked on either side by neon city lights. As the bus sped as if through the air, he contemplated what he had been drifting toward all along. A fundamental secret that, if revealed, would have serious ramifications, with Cengiz at its center. When Gökhan arrived back at the residence hall, it was past midnight and Cengiz was asleep. He closed the door quietly and went straight to bed. When he woke up in the morning, Cengiz has already left for class. For the next couple of days, Gökhan stayed out late studying in the library and slipped into the room late at night, with Cengiz always seeming to be deep asleep. He knew they should speak about what happened at some point, but not knowing how to have that conversation, he was grateful for this elaborate dance of mutual avoidance. On Wednesday, Gökhan had finished his lunch and was sipping hot black tea at the Manzara, where students hung out, when Cengiz sat down next to him on one of the benches facing the Bosphorus. Gökhan was pleased to see a generous slice of tiramisu in the transparent plastic container Cengiz laid on the seat between them. "I want to tell you a story," said Cengiz. "Will you listen?" "Of course," said Gökhan. "I had this best friend in high school. I liked him, and I think he liked me too. But once we both knew it, it became a burden. He stopped coming over to study, ignored me at school, and began dating a girl. I know he was scared, so was I, but I was so hurt that he dropped me as a friend. I still am." "I am sorry to hear that," said Gökhan. He thought of his friends Mert and his best friend Hasan from high school again, this time with guilt. He distanced himself from them after the incident at Castro, and Hasan disappeared that summer. It's okay, I was young and stupid. What did I expect? That we would be together and live happily ever after? Anyway, I'm telling you this because I need to ask you, will you promise me you won't stop being my friend? Gökhan looked away for a moment and then looked back and said, I don't know where I'll end up, but I never do that to you. He looked away again. I like you and I want to be your friend, I know that. That's all I wanted to hear, said Cengiz as he opened the container and passed the plastic spoon to Gökhan. You know, Reiko is still surprised that I eat so much dessert, said Cengiz. Gökhan observed that lately, Cengiz and Reiko had been bonding over Turkish coffee during study breaks in the garden outside the library. Cengiz would tease her by calling her his Japanese aunt because she'd always say he put too much sugar in his coffee. Relieved about the change of topic, Gökhan said, well, I was surprised too when I first met you, but at this point, why is she still talking about it? Apparently in Japan, boys are supposed to abstain from sweets as they grow up and become men. Gökhan paused for a moment. The trees in the manzara were in full bloom. Down the hill, sunshine reflected off the water that streamed quietly, and freight ships and oil tankers slowly wound through the strait. New construction dotted the hills beyond the water. He slowly raised the spoon in his right hand, let it hang in the air, and said, does Reiko know all Japanese men? She's not that kind of a woman, you know, said Cengiz. I mean, how can anyone be sure that all Japanese men do that, said Gökhan. If they do, that would be a life lived bland, said Cengiz. I agree, said Gökhan. They looked at each other and chuckled. They spooned the last bites of tiramisu, chewing the wet, spongy ladyfingers, and savored the bittersweet taste of coffee, alcohol, and sugar. Thank you. Happy Pride.
I'm going to try over here so I'm not in the way of the runway and the entrance and exit. Thank you, Serkan, for something sweet and messy. Next up, we have Thomas Grattan, who is the author of the novels The Recent East and In Tongues. And now I need to think of something else to say while he comes up here. I had to officiate a wedding over the weekend, and it was a lot harder than this. But I think we're an equal number of readings in the wedding as there are this evening. Okay, Thomas Grattan.
Sorry.
Welcome. You made it.
Hi, everyone. It's lovely to be here. So I'm going to read the beginning of In Tongue, so I don't really need to explain anything. So I'll just start from there. On the night Alan, my first serious boyfriend, dumped me, I lay awake on the couch I called ours, though he'd been the one to pay for it, waiting for anger or sadness or relief to come. What showed up instead was the suspended feeling that captures me from time to time, even now, like flinging myself from a diving board so I'm not rising or falling, but still. That weightlessness stayed as I packed everything worth taking into a pair of duffel bags and stole $200 from the drawer where Alan kept cash. It held steady as I drove to a dealership, its car's windshields laced with frost, and sold my own. Lingered as I hitchhiked to the bus station, where I waited in line behind a woman who took forever at the ticket counter, the clerk's mustache trembling with annoyance as she asked one question, then another, a custodian next to us smacking a mop up and down. But then another clerk showed up, sharp lines around her mouth and eyes, and said, next. And as my bags and I made it to the counter and she asked where to, my descent began. So I said the first and maybe only place that came to mind, one I'd never been to before. For that day-long bus ride from Minneapolis to New York, stillness switched to falling, though as we passed billboards about all-you-can-eat buffets and abortions, as towns came and went with aluminum-sided sameness, I itched with the excitement of not knowing where I'd land. Where I finally landed was an apartment in an attic above a garage in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, a job stocking shelves at the Foodland across the street. Car exhaust crept through the apartment's floor, so I left the windows cracked open and moved the sofa, a pullout according to the landlord, though its pullout mechanism had rusted itself closed next to the window. But the apartment was cheap. The landlord hadn't even asked for a security deposit. This was a sad relief, cheapness my only horizon. As I lay on the sofa each night, light from the Foodland sign searing through my window, I wanted to return to that line in the bus station and name some other city instead. But I would have been met with disappointment anywhere, been shocked by it too. That was me then, surprised by results as inevitable as a math problem solution, most due to how easily and often I jumped, with no plan for what I'd do once I'd thrown myself into the air. At Foodland, I stocked shelves and organized inventory under the supervision of a man named Thor. And though the job wasn't what I'd hoped for, its boring purpose was all I had to hold on to, so I took it seriously. I made sure labels on cans were perfectly straight until the repetition of graphic and word, baked beans, baked beans, baked beans, felt like art. Kept the back area so clean that even Thor, who I sensed didn't like me, grudgingly said, "You're making it harder for the mice." His compliment, a warm hand on my cheek. A few days into that job, I asked one of the cashiers a question. She looked shocked. "I didn't know," she said. Her name was Marcy. "Didn't know what?" I asked. Marcy had small features and wore a product in her hair that made it look perpetually wet. She admitted that they'd all thought with my dark hair and pale skin, clothes a cheap approximation of what was fashionable, that I was from some country that used to be a part of Russia and, quote, ended in Stan, end quote. Curse words being my only English. "I know a lot of words," I said, then told her I had something to do in the dairy case. I saw Marcy again an hour later, both of us in the store's back alley on a cigarette break. The dumpster's rot perfumed the air. "I still can't believe you speak English," she said. I answered with a series of complicated English words, onomatopoeia and incumbent and lackadaisical. It had rained earlier that day, water plinked from a gutter. "You're weird," Marcy said, then asked me where I was from. I told her. "Maybe what's weird here is normal there," she said. "You sound like a philosopher," I answered. "You sound like you're making fun of me." "I wasn't making fun," I said. "I hope Marcy and I might become friends. I had no friends in New York, spent days off from work walking until blisters collared my heels, or smoking too much and lying on the couch, wishing the apartment had come with a television. I was weird in Minnesota too." I returned from my break. Thor saw me and said, "Was looking for you." Thor seemed eternally annoyed. He could rest several boxes on his gut and called everything, from a person he didn't like to a difficult stain, a faggot. This was just how he talked, though I also sensed it was his way of letting me know he was on to me. Each time he said that word, I picked up more boxes than was comfortable or deepened my voice. My attempts at passing made it worse. "There's meat," he said. Thor spoke in as few words as possible. Whenever I asked for clarification, he sometimes said the same words again, sometimes louder. I walked to the cooler, saw it was low on stew beef, and went in the back to get some. At home that night, I was unsure if I wanted to jerk off or cry. I did both half-heartedly. Waking up hours later to a shivering light, the L in the Foodland sign was beginning to go. The next day, I saw Marcy and said, "Welcome to Food and." She looked at me like I had something stuck in my teeth and was deciding whether or not to tell me. One night after work, I took the subway to Prospect Park. I walked into the woods where men met for sex, one of the few things that offered me a break from failure's blunt noise. If I found someone who was game, it was usually rough and fast, the men so haggard-looking or so masked by hoodies and baseball caps that I felt more than saw them. That night, I met a man with sunglasses on. I began to hum a song about wearing sunglasses at night, but he squeezed my jaw with one hand, used the other to lower me to my knees. His dick filled my mouth, small stones knifed my shins. He came and stepped away, dick bobbing in front of him. "Thank you," I said, but he didn't answer. As I walked out of the park past half-empty bars and brownstones with bikes chained to their fences, it hit me how dangerous what I'd just done was, even more that I didn't care. I got on the subway, my throat sore from the way it had just been used, and said, I did an inordinate amount of talking to myself then. Well, that got the job done. Though a few minutes later, the train stuck between stops, its bald fluorescence giving everyone a jaundiced hue, I added, What job was that? And a man across from me looked up with such disgust that I wondered if I'd been talking to myself for longer. For the rest of the ride, I gorged myself on the self-pity I'd grown up with, one I'd first mimicked, then made my own. It was my special skill, I told a boyfriend years later. He smiled with polite embarrassment, then changed the subject. Thank you.
Thank you to Thomas for giving us so much laughter. I didn't realize how much I needed that. And also hearing such an enticing beginning makes me want to remind everyone that we're about halfway through our first act, and all of these books are available for sale, and all of these lovely readers will be signing in a little intermission between acts. So if you have a new crush, you can buy their book as a means to meet them and get your book signed by your new crush. All right. Oh, Christina's I'm the new crush. All the way at the back there. All right, next we have Griffin Hansbury, who is the author of Vanishing New York, Feral City, and Some Strange Music Draws Me In. In addition to being an author, he is also a transgender psychoanalyst. If anyone needs a new psychoanalyst, if anyone's in the market, here's your new psychoanalyst and author.
Hello, thank you for being here, and thank you to the Center for Fiction for having me. I'm reading from Some Strange Music Draws Me In, and very quickly, it's trans, masculine, Gen X, coming of age. Most of it takes place in 1984, but I'm going to be reading from a 2019 section where trans Uncle Max is the narrator, and he's home in his crummy little blue-collar Massachusetts town after his mother's death to clean out the house. And in this scene, he's bonding with his great-niece, Dakota, who's 12 years old. Dakota and I are going through my closet. She's supposed to be helping sort and trash, but she's fascinated by my photo albums. She can't believe that's really me with the baby face and all that hair, a kid around Dakota's age trying to figure it out. I struggle to recognize myself. I thought I was overweight, but the photos show an average-sized kid. How did I get it so wrong? I'm probably getting it wrong now. Do we ever get to enjoy our bodies while we live in them? At breakfast today, Dakota was talking about bathing suits. She wants a new one, she told Donna, my sister. A one-piece, because last summer she had a two-piece, and everyone was staring at me. It was like boom, bada, boom, boom. When I asked her to clarify, she said, I have boobs, Uncle Max. Donna made an unkind comment, and I felt bad for the kid having to endure the pains of adolescence under the cloud of my sister's disgruntlement. I wish she had another option, but she'll survive, I'd tell myself, like I survived. We all have to fight our own battles. Dakota plops to the closet floor and tugs at a dresser drawer so crammed with stuff she has to prop her foot against the frame and wrench it open. When she pulls out my Michael Jackson Beat It jacket, red vinyl slashed with silver zippers, she slips it on and dances around, mimicking the moves that have survived 3 decades, embedded in the DNA of pop, despite the revelations of child abuse. What does Michael's downfall mean to those of us who invested our first experience of erotic love with him? Were we collectively groomed as children? I still listen to his music. It's so retro, Dakota says, hugging the jacket to her. Can I keep it? Put it in the trash. But why? It's super cool. I hold open the garbage bag and give it a shake. He's been canceled, I say. She huffs and drops the jacket to the floor. I put it in the bag, followed by more devalued memorabilia, buttons and bubblegum cards. The doll I thought would be a collector's item, the one I undressed to see what Michael had underneath, finding only smooth plastic. Love, I think, is inscrutable. Who are you into? I asked Dakota. Who's cool these days? Justin Bieber? Ew, she says, gross, he's super disgusting. You're 12, there must be someone. My favorite YouTuber is Jeffree Star, Dakota says. Yes, honey. She raises a hand in the air and snaps her fingers like a drag queen. Jeffree Star, she explains, is a gay YouTube celebrity famous for applying elaborate contouring makeup to his face. She shows me a video on her cracked phone. I don't care for the contouring trend. It makes everyone look like an avatar, too cartoonish to be human. He looks like one of those Kardashian people, I say. Oh my God, Dakota gasped. I hate the Kardashians. You can tell how Kylie's lips are fake and Kim's butt is fake. I don't know which one is worser. Worse, I say. Worser is incorrect. It's a double comparative. She ignores my pedantic correction and goes on to talk about drag queens. Do you watch RuPaul's Drag Race? She asked. It is the best show on television ever. You really should watch it because you're trans and everything. I'm not the fabulous kind of trans, I say, shoving a pair of glitter socks into the trash. I'm the boring kind. Dakota's love for drag queens and gay boys and makeup makes me curious. Is she some kind of queer? But it's not surprising. Riding the internet, gender queerness has permeated the nervous heart of the heartland, going mainstream and sending boondock America into hysteria, panicked about bathrooms and social contagion, while its enlightened children snap on unicorn horns, ditch the binary, and live without shame. There's power in numbers. I had only Michael Jackson, whose gender remains a mystery, but could have been now that we have the words cloud gender, agender, gender mutt. In a New York Times article from 1984, a psychologist said, his androgyny holds a fascination for adolescents. Unconsciously, it's hard to give up the possibility of being both sexes. This ambivalence is more obvious in the early teens and goes underground around 15 or so. He embodies someone who seems to live out that ambisexual fantasy. That's an actual quote from the New York Times in 1984. It is almost impossible to become what you cannot see and cannot name. I grabbed every scrap. Here's my Michael Jackson glove, decorated with sequins I sewed myself. I wore it to school every day, an act of defiance at a time when the glove was outlawed. Across the country, teachers confiscated them, claiming they were overstimulating to the student body. That's actually true. They too worried about queerness as social contagion. When I toss it in the trash, Dakota gasps. Her fascination with drag queens includes a reverence for sequins, and she asks if she can have them. When I say yes, she finds a pair of scissors and carefully snips away each silver disc, collecting them in a pile on the rug. Yes, honey, she whispers as she cuts. A soothing incantation. I wonder if she too has been touched by the unicorn's glitter horn. I ask, are you into gender stuff? One of the kids at my school is a non-binary person, she says. Is that your trans friend that you mentioned? No, someone else. There's more than one? She shrugs like, duh, and then explains non-binary as if I might not know. Sometimes this person can be a girl, she says, and sometimes they can be a boy. You can't assume someone is female if they have breasts and long hair and stuff. Gender's what's in your head. If I wanted to be non-binary, it wouldn't be because of my body parts. It would be because of my head. This is how a 12-year-old from the hinterlands of America gives a more astute explanation of the difference between gender and sex than most of the college-educated adults I've known. Certainly no one in my family ever talked like this. The word gender was never uttered. Hearing it now, from family, I find myself struck by a longing for kinship. Maybe I'm not the only one. But this is a young feeling, a line cast from the deep past where nothing can ever change, and I shake it off. Thank you.
Now I just want to hang out with Dakota. I feel like she needs to be added to this lineup. Yeah, I see a lot of nods, a lot of demand. Dakota couldn't make it tonight because she had another engagement. All right, thank you, Griffin. Oh. All right, we lost one. Next up, we have Khashayar? Khabushani, who is a queer Iranian American writer and should start walking. Okay, you're gonna is a queer Iranian American writer who lives in Brooklyn, New York, where he writes, plays basketball, rides his bicycle, and spends too much time worrying about money. And it's punctuated with a little smiley face. Woo!
I had to do that. I was thinking about it the whole time. It's so nice to be here, and then I wonder why I don't get invited back to these things because I jump on stages. I was hanging out in the lobby beforehand, and I saw Anthony So's new book. My head has been too far up my ass to realize that his other book came out, and I was going through it, and there's this great paragraph that really embodies, I feel, his humor and his charisma, and the fact that it was also a great reminder that I'll never be a good writer in comparison. I'm just in awe of what Anthony was able to do. And for those of you who don't know, Anthony passed away in 2020. And it being Pride Month, and whether you yourself are queer or queer friends, I know I can speak for myself. There were many instances where I wasn't going to make it to this point, and so I'm so full of joy now. I could get naked in front of you, which I won't do, but that is literally a thing that I'm having to keep myself from doing right now, which is remarkable considering where I was not too long ago. And I think Anthony, I wish he would have been able to get to this point as well. So this is just a short graph from an essay he published. I want to give you, everyone in my audience, some words of advice. Never eat $20 worth of fast food at 4 p.m. and then immediately take a nap when it is 104 degrees outside, because when I did that, I had an absolutely fucked up dream. I woke up in a panic and sweaty all over, even in the most obscure places of my body, from a dream where my dead grandparents came to me and screamed, "We did not die in a genocide so that you could pass out in the middle of the day after eating 20 tacos from Jack in the Box." That's Thank you, Anthony. You are fucking extraordinary, babe. This is the paperback of my novel, I Will Greet the Sun Again. Please buy it and read it. It's a really tender book about noticing and being noticed. What you need to know, Baba in Farsi is a father, Maman is mother, Justin is the name of a boy, Sean is the name of a boy, two boys who are brothers to Kay, the protagonist. We drive through Malibu's canyon and into a short tunnel where Bubba punches down on the horn and glances over his shoulder at me and my brothers. A quick smile on his lips and our ritual begins, Bubba telling us to let it all out, make as much noise as you can. But this time, instead of shouting, I lower my window, feeling the cool darkness as we reach the end of the tunnel, the final echoes bouncing off my cheeks and jaw. And that's when Justin leans over, yelling at me to roll up the window because the drumming from the wind is hurting his head. I don't listen to him. I keep going, looking up at the slivers of sunlight pouring through the tall green trees, until finally my brother reaches over, rolls up the window himself, and now my neck is stuck between the window frame and the glass, both of us laughing as I beg for mercy. A few miles down Pacific Coast Highway, Bubba finds our spot, parks the car right here on the shoulder of the cliff. He puts the red metal lock in place on the steering wheel and hurries around to the trunk, takes out the Coleman camping stove to fire up for chai when we're down by the water. The three of us strip off our jeans, changing into shorts. I peek over at Sean, wanting to know what it'll look like when I'm older, wondering if his has the same pink and brown as mine. Bubba is standing at the edge of the cliff. I join him and my brothers do too. All of us lined up together in a row, and for a second I close my eyes, just listening. The water crashing onto shore, the ocean's big salty breath huffing through the wind. With my eyes closed, the waves feel closer than they really are, as if the ocean's hum lives inside of me too. Until Sean pretends to shove me off the cliff, scaring me good. Then Bubba shows us 3/4 in his open palm, smiling so big, he says whoever gets there first gets these. Racing down the cliff's narrow dirt path, Justin is in the lead, though not by much. He's followed by Sean, and right behind him there's me, skipping and jumping through the thick vines and dusty rocks, my naked feet landing with theirs. When we reach the beach, Justin and me wrestle Sean to the ground, scooping handfuls of sand and forcing them between his teeth while two women stare and ask, "Don't these kids have parents?" Now I'm in the lead, leaping over sandcastles and abandoned towels, arriving at the lip of the ocean. Justin follows, and together we look back, waiting for Sean. The sun throws its light onto our chests, heating our skin. Sean finally arrives, his eyes red from the sand. Justin counts down from 5, and I pinch my nostrils as we plunge into the waves, roaring, "It's so fucking cold," Sean goes, and then Justin yells, "I'm getting out." Splashing them both, I tread farther into sea because once you go under, it isn't so bad. Floating near the shore, I watch my brothers. Justin walking along the water as Sean collapses onto the sand, his body open and free, here for the sun. And there's Bubba, stumbling down the path from the top of the cliff. He drops the cooler off with Sean, and right away my brother pulls out a cola, snapping it open, holding up the can as its dark liquid rushes into his mouth and across his chin. He waits for it to rise from his gut, a burp so long and loud that the lifeguard sitting up high at her station will notice him. This is Sean's favorite part of coming to the beach, winking at the girl of his dreams, the lifeguard shaking her blonde head, laughing. "It doesn't get any better than this," Bubba roars, driving his arms into the ocean, his knees kicking up high as he stomps his feet, setting off fireworks of salty mist that spray me, the white ocean birds hovering above. He scoops up handfuls of the sharp blue water, dumping them onto himself as if the water were God's, put here for prayer. Like this, Bubba becomes clean again. "This time," he shouts, turning toward me, "this time we're going all the way." He wraps his arm around my shoulder as I join him, bringing my chilled skin into his. "All the way out there," he tells me, pointing past the surfers drifting, waiting for the perfect wave, past the orange cone bobbing in the water and the lifeguard's red and white boat dashing across. My eyes follow his to the edge of the ocean, the shadowy blue water leaning up into puff white clouds, long milky threads stretched across the bottom of the sky. Waves dipping and then folding into Bubba's chest, he lowers himself into the ocean. A smile splashed across his face. I keep watching as he chants it again and again. "It's perfect out here," Bubba says. "Perfect." He then points higher into the sky, the sun spreading its light through the clouds so bright, as Bubba reminds me, again, how he saw it in my eyes from the very beginning, holding me in his arms after I was born, a light inside of me as strong as the sun. He helps me climb into his back, my arms wrapped and locked across his chest. I let my legs dangle and hang as he stumbles to his feet, tightening his grip around my ankles, telling me that he's here, he's holding on. Taking 2 steps back, then shuffling his legs forward, Bubba drives his toes deep into the sand, digs in his balance, and I could feel each step crunching through his legs, snapping through his chest until they no longer do, because now we're floating. The ocean borrows our weight and carries us toward the end, the sting from the salt and the sun burning my eyes open. Bubba turns his neck, tells me to get ready. "After that one gets here," he says, his eyes now focused on the wave coming toward us, "follow me underneath." "But I thought you said we're going all the way," I tell him, my voice carried away by the wind. "Almost," he shouts, "almost." My shoulders lean back, my body no longer huddled into Bubba's, the bones in my chest stretching as I take bigger and longer bites of air, storing them inside while Bubba drinks down his final breath, escaping below. And me? And so now I rise in the ocean's lap, higher and then higher as the wave curls and drapes over, tucking me inside what's now become a hushed blue cave, where the ocean is quieter than Bubba or my brothers will ever know. Its blue skin becoming my own, the waves' white vein ripping through, and I watch as the cave begins to crack and then snap, spitting me out and thrashing my body, my face slamming onto the ocean floor, and still, here underneath with this fire in my lungs, salt churning in my stomach, the ocean saying, "I told you so, you should have never come out this far." I don't close my eyes, don't ask for it to stop. I just keep watching, waiting for it to happen again, that pretty moment where I was tucked inside of my own quiet, noticed. Thank you.
That was lovely to hear Anthony's words as well. And I thought there was going to be as dramatic an exit as there was an entrance, but maybe, concern about knees. Our next reader is Myriam Lacroix, who is our second Canadian of the evening, a Montreal-born writer living in Vancouver, British Columbia. She has an MFA from Syracuse University, where she was editor-in-chief of Salt Hill and received the New York Public Humanities Fellowship for founding Outfront, an LGBTQ+ writing group whose goal was to expand the possibilities of queer writing. All right, and here is our second Canadian of the evening.
everyone. It really is a journey to get here, you wouldn't think. So yeah, I'm Myriam. This is my book, How It Works Out. How It Works Out is what I call a relationship multiverse, in which each chapter offers an alternate outcome to the relationship between Myriam and Allison, who are a queer couple. The chapters begin with these kind of dreamy hypotheticals like you have in early relationships, and as the book progresses, you get to know the characters a little bit more. The relationship gets a little more complicated, twisted, darkly humorous, as the publishing people say. So I'm gonna read from a chapter called The Sequel, and it's about halfway through the book. At this point in the novel, the relationship is not going super well, and yet I do, I say. But I can't focus on the words. I'm distracted by the El Canada photographer, whose finger is going at the shutter button like she's trying to get it off. Oh, shoot, I forgot to say, this is from the Allison character's perspective. Sorry. Okay, the photographer is trying to get off the camera. All right. Steve is typing like crazy on his phone, live tweeting. He's our agent, Steve, mine and Myriam's. 10 years ago, he helped us sell our book, How It Works Out, Building a Healthy Lesbian Relationship in the Patriarchy. Without him, Myriam would still be making lattes for yogis and designer Gore-Tex, and I'd still be answering phone calls from sweaty people with broken air conditioners. We helicoptered out of Vancouver early this morning and were dropped off in the snow-sticky slopes of Banff. We could have driven, but Myriam insisted that being helicoptered to her wedding has always been her dream. She's always making up these dreams. And you wonder where our money goes, I said as the pilot lugged Myriam's 6 large suitcases and my small carry-on into the penthouse of the Fairmont Hotel. After that, we stopped by the local radio station for a pre-wedding interview. Myriam and Allison tying the knot. Who would have thought we'd see the day, said the CKXI host, John McFarland. In the last chapter of your book, you warn readers that even lesbians who succeed at marriage ultimately fail, for they have succeeded only in infiltrating an institution that hates them. What changed, guys? Thanks for bringing this up, John, Myriam said. This was actually one of our biggest fears when we decided to do this, that our readers would feel like we misled them. But John, we wrote How It Works Out over 10 years ago. Our views have evolved. It's only healthy. You can only try to beat the system for so long, I picked up, before you decide to work it to your advantage. Besides, don't I have the most beautiful bride? There you have it, folks. True love. Thanks for stopping by today, ladies. Now, in your honor, we're going to play a little Tegan and Sarah track called Boyfriend from the album Love You to Death. Is it true they'll be at the wedding? They better be, Myriam laughed. You hear that, TNS? Be there or be square, the host laughed. Now I'm in some chateau, kissing Myriam, slipping in some tongue for the press. I pick her up and jog her down the aisle, smiling to show off my crooked canine, which some internet forums agree is my best attribute. In the second pew, I notice Tegan tracing her bicep tattoo with her forefinger, while Sarah stares at the back of my dad's head with disgust. Myriam squeals, tucking her nose into my bow-tied neck. I'm not sure when to put her down, so I carry her all the way to our suite, feeling my lower back scream. Oh my God, Kristen Stewart retweeted one of our wedding pics, Myriam yells, even though I can hear her perfectly because she's peeing with the door open. She knows I hate this, but she won't be robbed of the pleasure she gets from exposing her bodily functions to me. I look at my phone to see the Kristen retweet. Hashtag MA wedding is trending. So is hashtag how it works out. I see a text from Steve that says, "It's in the bag." Steve has been trying to get publishers interested in a sequel to How It Works Out. When it first came out, How It Works Out was on every queer woman's shelf, but lately sales have dropped to almost nothing. The new generation doesn't find us radical enough. Nobody cares if a couple of Canadian lesbians have a happy ending. So Steve had an idea. If we can't win over the queer feminists, we might have a chance with the right-wing lesbians, the gated community dykes. They're the ones with disposable income anyway. First step was to get married, get the media's attention, show publishers the names Myriam and Allison still mean something. "It's all gonna work out, baby," Myriam says. She plops onto the bed, and I notice she's not wearing any underwear under her slip. I avert my eyes. "I need to go down to the hotel store," I say. "I need stuff for the honeymoon." I don't need to look. I know she's wearing the expression that says, "You are so uptight. You ruin everything." "Don't you think I look nice?" she says. "Of course," I say, remembering the way she looked when we were young and I loved her enough to write a book about our love. Sort of pretty in a tired way. She puts on her dress for the reception, a pink tulle puff with too much breast padding, and I'm confronted with the way she looks now, like a performance of herself.
Thank you to Myriam for rounding out our first act with some more messy. So I think at this point we're going to take a little break. There are beverages, there are new friends to meet, there are books to buy. And Melanie, where will all of our authors who appeared in the first act be signing? Okay, right outside. So if you read in the first act, get ready to sign. All right, I will see you back here in like 10 minutes, 15 minutes? 15 minutes, part 2.
If you're reading in the second half and you didn't give me a bio, please give me a bio.
Here are the bios that we do.
All right, fabulous folks, if you would find your seats. If you're reading in the second half, there's seats up here, and there's seats for your friends too if you want to move up here to get on stage easier. But there are no rules at a reading like this. You do you. All right. God, you guys are so amazing. Zalek, would you mute the music again? Oh, you did. Thank you. Okay, so welcome back, and here is our host for the second half, Denne.
Hi. Hold on. I don't know. I just kind of wanted to sit up here for a moment. Welcome back. Thank you, everyone, for being here and not leaving. We really appreciate it. So we're gonna get going. I don't know. I don't have too much else to say. Let's stay messy and keep going. Daniel Lefferts. Woo! I think you should always just clap after I say the name. That's the way to do this. Holds an MFA from Columbia University and has taught writing at Columbia and Rutgers. His debut novel, Ways and Means, was published in February. Welcome, Daniel.
Yeah, thank you everyone for being here, and thank you for having me, Center for Fiction. So I'm just going to read 2 pages from my novel, and I'll just tell you a little bit about the book and a little about the scene. So Ways and Means is a literary, financial, and political thriller about 3 gay men in New York City in 2016. The main character, his name is Alistair. He comes from a lower middle class background, and he's come to NYU Stern, the business school at NYU, in the hope of getting a lucrative job in investment banking and making a better life for himself and his mother. Along the way, he gets romantically involved with an older couple named Mark and Elijah, who come from very different economic circumstances. And then the 3 of them will go on to get into various forms of trouble: financial, moral, criminal, and eventually bloody. So in this scene, Alistair has just bombed his summer internship at JP Morgan Chase. And he has emerged from the internship without an offer, which, if you're familiar with the business school track, which I'm sure everyone here is a death knell. So his future is not looking bright. He's just gotten very drunk with his fellow Sternies, all of whom do have offers from Goldman Sachs, Deutsche Bank, and whatnot. So he's feeling very bad for himself. And in his self-pity and need for creaturely comfort, he has stumbled to Phoenix, a gay bar in the East Village. And that is where he meets Mark and Elijah. So that's this scene with some overview at the beginning. Excuse me. Alistair's first weeks with Mark and Elijah would later strike him as some of the happiest of his life, though he would never have called himself happy at the time. He was still humiliated at being rejected by JP Morgan Chase, distraught by the self-sabotage that had led to his being rejected, and racked by persistent low-level panic about the sudden curtailment of his career possibilities. Nor would he have called Mark and Elijah happy. It was clear that he'd come into their lives at a moment of decline, that they were bored by each other, dried up, enervated. They seemed to him like a nation in the last stages of empire, impelled by decadence and wasting on way to incite a revolution simply for the novelty of it, as a kind of test of the staying power of its institutions. But he liked the men more than he'd ever liked any man, and incidentally or otherwise, the sex was sublime. That first night in early September, they sat at the corner table at Phoenix until the bar had largely cleared out. Mark and Elijah seemed nervous, tentative and self-conscious, keen to deflect attention from themselves and from the embarrassing sexual experiment they'd embarked on. So they asked Alistair about himself, and Alistair, drunk and consumed by self-pity, obliged. He told them about his summer at the bank, the mess he'd made of his opportunity, the unbearable joy of his fellow Sternies. He made them laugh. He realized for the first time that he was a none too terrible storyteller, and he realized it only then, probably because he'd never been so forthcoming. He showed Mark and Elijah more of himself than he'd ever shown anyone, absent his mother, and to judge by the charmed flush in their faces, they liked this self very much. "And what do you two do?" he asked them. Mark and Elijah inched back from the... I can't see because of the microphone. Okay. Mark and Elijah inched back from the table and flitted their eyes toward the space between them. They wore nice clothes, Mark in casual prep gear and Elijah in form-fitting, muscle-accentuating black, and by this point Mark had spent, by Alistair's estimate, some $150 on drinks for all three of them. Their silence persisted. "I want to hear more about the Stern boys," Elijah said. "I run past there all the time. My curiosity is boundless." "Elijah is a graphic designer," Mark answered for him. Alistair heard well-seasoned irony in Mark's voice. "Where?" "He's a solo operator," Mark said. "When I operate," Elijah said gallantly. The facts were quickly coming into focus. "And you?" he said to Mark. "Mark writes," Elijah said. "What do you write?" Alistair said. Elijah turned to Mark, grinning impishly, enjoying himself, keen to share his humiliation. "Yes, Mark," he said. "What do you write?" Alistair smiled. He envisioned inheritances, monthly parental subsidies, calls to wills and trust attorneys in Tony hometowns. But though he felt the spark of his old resentment, it died out quickly. The plenitude of people of plentiful means had ceased to gall him, and he even appreciated, given his own recent failure, that Mark and Elijah had no obvious accomplishments to their credit. Mark changed the subject. "I'm sorry you feel doomed," he said to Alistair. He had a curious way of looking at him both intently and obliquely. He seemed, in his shyness, in his almost sorrowfulness, to be drawn to Alistair's pain. "But you don't seem doomed to me." Elijah shook his head, as if both to agree with Mark's assessment and to clear the air of Mark's dolefulness. He seemed to be drawn to other things about Alistair, his rancor, his daunting youth, his hard edges. "You'll be fine," he said to Alistair. "For now you should just have fun. That's why Mark and I came out tonight, to have fun." He eyed Mark entreatingly. "Isn't that right?" They spent the next few minutes wordlessly finishing their drinks, studying one another's movements, trafficking in one another's pheromones. By telepathic consensus, they agreed to stand up all at once, and by the same unspoken consensus, they agreed that Alistair would go home with them. Thank you.
In honor of Pride Month and the necessity of reminders that we've got to continue to support our local queer businesses, I'm just going to admit that many a person in this room, I'm sure, has gotten into some trouble, some mess at Phoenix. Okay, our next reader, Roya Marsh, a Bronx, New York native. Roya Marsh is a poet, performer, educator, and activist. She's the author of Daylight, a finalist for the Lambda Literary Award in lesbian poetry, and the forthcoming Savings Time. Roya works fervently toward queer liberation and dismantling white supremacy. Roya Marsh.
Hey.
Hey.
Hey. How's everyone doing? Woo! All right. I am Roya, that's true. All of those other things that were said are also true. This is Daylight.
It's in the front there. I'm very grateful to be here, to be sharing space with you all. Thank you to the curators who put this event together. I am at the Center for Fiction, but everything I'm about to say to you is totally a fact. And I'm not gonna, okay, remarkable poems in this book, let me tell you. Let me tell you. Even if I didn't write them, I would most likely say that. What I'm going to share, though, is going to be from the forthcoming collection, and I want to say quadruply remarkable. It is the night after another election, and I don't smile. I lie, awake, wondering what kind of ancestor I will be. I am the child of a hard father that only wanted soft daughters. I learned to make a perfect fist on my own. I learned to swing by watching, by feeling. And my hands grew into grenades. I learned to fight before I learned to speak. I learned I hold the pen tight. I learned when to explode. I learned, though I am always at war, not every room is a battlefield. I shout Black joy across the world. And folks with smiles, the smell of green bean casserole will praise me for not being angry. The definition of angry is showing a strong feeling of displeasure, annoyance, or hostility. Well, shit, I've been angry. My fists have painted holes into walls. I was 14 the first time I had to stomp a man's face into mashed potatoes. I used to pray to a father who would never come home. A black butch with a slick tongue and a hunger for freedom. I am the kind of sorry no one teaches you to forgive. I say black joy so they hear shuck and jive. Think me palatable, the good black. Well, no, this ain't what enlightenment looks like. I have a backpack full of screw ups and screw yous, but there came a point where tears could no longer wash any of this shit clean. And there are still days that I want out, but I am no better if I only save myself. And right now, there are people lining the floors of arenas waiting to hear me tell them losing is at capacity. I guess we going to win. Someone gave me a pen and I wrote a spine into my sack of skin. Imagine me not being angry, explaining to white folks that anti-racist work ain't hashtagging or posting a black box not fit enough to hold my last breath or raising me up by white guilt straps. Anti-racism means you are willing to die for my kind of black that built the country they are still trying to write us out of. What good is writing poems to my unborn when I have nieces and nephews and students? They are shutting down one prison to build 4 and have a bunk with our last names on it. They are waiting for us to forget that we are chosen. And yes, while I'm God's daughter, my godson's father is locked in a cage. So no, I don't write poems about caskets or burials. That is just another way for the world to hold me hostage. Tell the dead I am still here. Tell the here I am still fighting. I have lived and learned to walk on the seas beneath and between us. The ship is sinking, but I'm teaching my people to swim, to wade in the war zones where our joy endangers us, buying groceries, eating ice cream, playing video games in a backyard, in a parking lot, on a playground, on a wine train. The people in my family are still breathing, and that is not a crime. The people in my family are still reproducing, and that is not a crime. I say we gon' make it. Be real black for me, all right? Someday we'll all be free, and it sounds like I'm talking to God on replay. I was born a black woman in America. Bitterness beckons, inspired by my mere existence. A black butch born, waiting for this land of the free to bust a capitalist in my ass, and folks think me being angry is the problem. I say black joy, and I mean I forgive my father. I mean Fuck the police. I mean, dismantle white supremacy. I mean, I was handcuffed one night and then kettled on the Manhattan Bridge the next and still live to teach their kids in the morning I am everything America threatens to break, and the threat, and the break, and America itself. What I'm saying is no. I'm not angry. I'm coming. I say black joy, and I mean, who are you when we start taking what we are owed?
Sometimes we should consider adding the word preacher to our bios, because that was a sermon and took me all the way to church. Joseph Osmundson. Thank you. My very dear friend and sister in poetry is a scientist and a writer. His novel Grandview will be out in March. Joe.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for that last reading. Thank you all for organizing, for being here. I'm feeling a little sheepish with all of the dark and funny. My novel's just dark. It's about a young boy who's growing up without realizing that his father has killed his mother and gotten away with it, so he's being raised by his father. And the novel largely is about inheritance of white supremacist violence, and he has to decide whether he can be different than that inheritance. One of the editors who rejected it said it was a tad too dark for her right now. But I'm not reading from the darkest portions, so you're welcome. It's rural Washington State. It's the 1990s. It's fall. Rains haven't really set in yet, but it is cloudy. And he's with his best friend at his house staying over. The sun was getting close to setting, not that they could see it through the clouds, and they were on the back in the gravel drive closest to Zach's grandparents' house. It was time to park the dirt bike, but instead of leaving one of them to walk back, Zach got in front, and Drew's job was to hop on behind, wrapping his arms around Zach's middle, feeling his crotch pull so close to Zach's rear end, in a sensation that he felt should be wrong. It tingled in his... I also was like, if you are a gay boy and you had any of these feelings growing up, I kind of want you to raise your hand as I go through the reading. It tingled in his crotch, but it wasn't wrong. It was just two friends riding a dirt bike together, something any boys would do. That night, lights out, Zach's ceiling glowed from the plastic glow-in-the-dark stars stuck all over it, large and small, spread out in their own constellations. There was church in the morning, but the late service. The plastic stars shone bright green and would dim slowly throughout the night until the light returned in the morning to fill the room. Can I tell you? Zach's voice went down to almost nothing. They didn't lock their doors in Zach's house. I broke into my sister's room. Drew laughed under his breath at the idea of breaking into a room in a house with no locked doors. They talked about this the last times Drew was trying on Zach's athletic cup. Drew didn't play sports, but Zach played baseball. Drew asked what it felt like, and Zach said, "Here, try it on." In the upper bunk, Drew pulled down his Hanes and pulled up the jock, and he felt bubbles in his guts, but in a good way. I got her panties, Zach said. Nice, Drew said, trying to play it cool. But I think I want to try on your jock again, Drew whispered. Sure. There was quiet between them. You know where it is. You don't have to ask. So Drew climbed down from the top bunk, one rung at a time. He wasn't worried about getting hurt, but he didn't want to make any noise. Drew didn't believe they were doing anything wrong. They weren't touching. They were just trying on underwear in their separate bunks. Drew liked it, and Zach must have too, otherwise he wouldn't be sitting in the bottom bunk holding a pair of girls' underwear. It was in Zach's bedroom that he'd first tried on boxers, but he found them uncomfortable, too loose, too out of control. He liked the feeling of fabric holding him down, but the cup was different. The solid plastic almost hurt, but somehow made he didn't really know how to describe the feeling. In the top bunk, Drew turned on his stomach and pressed the front of his body into the mattress. It hurt and it tickled, and bubbles floated up from his balls to his back to his brain, and he liked it. "Can we trade?" Drew asked. He didn't have a sister, and he had no idea what a girl might wear. Zach's hand appeared next to his bunk. The panties were warm from his body. Drew dropped the cup into Zach's empty palm. The sister's underwear was black, but otherwise similar to his Hanes, just without that little pouch in front. He pulled them up his thighs and looked down. They were so black they disappeared into the darkness. Drew looked up at the faint green stars and fell asleep. His guts continued their bubbling. Now he knew what girls' panties were like. In the morning, under the same white ceiling, he wondered if anyone in church that morning would see what he had done. But the panties felt good. It scared him. He looked up at the sickly green plastic stars now collecting light from what little the sky gave off through its cloud, and he smiled, knowing that he could be something different than everything this place and his people told him to be. He didn't understand his own smile. Yes, looking back, he knew then that he was different than other boys. Being different made his body feel good. His body could do something that didn't just keep him safe, it could give him pleasure. That afternoon, when the first real rain of the season fell, we all felt relieved. Instead of waiting and worrying, the short, soggy days of winter had finally arrived. Up on White Horse Mountain, it fell down as snow. Thank you so much.
That's the first time I've heard anything from that novel, so I'm very happy to hear it. The next author is someone I've actually been dying to meet for a very long time, so I'm really excited. Lucy Sante is the author of many books. She has written 2 memoirs, one on each gender. Lucy.
Just flew in from there, and boy, are my arms tired. So I'm reading from my memoir about what it's like to come out as transgender in one's late 60s after having repressed it for like almost 60 years. I did not have a strong gender identity when I was small. I drew pictures and played with my large family of stuffed animals to whom I assigned family roles. I read the adventures of the boy reporter Tintin, but I also read the purely quotidian adventures of Martine, a sort of every girl, which must have been sent by a relative. I have a distinct but vague memory, I couldn't tell you the year or even the country, of being somewhere with my parents and picking something up, a magazine, a record, with a girl's face on it, and them laughing at me. I certainly took it as a warning to avoid displaying pictures of girls, to not, say, tack up pictures of Françoise Hardy, R.I.P., all over my room after my paternal aunt and uncle, small-town newsagents, began sending me the French teen magazine Salut les copains. But I didn't really know what the laughter meant. Were they laughing because it seemed suspiciously feminine that I would be interested in a girl in a magazine? Or was it because it seemed precociously heterosexual? That second one did not occur to me at the time. But I was never pushed in any conspicuously masculine direction either. Despite his interest in sports, He was an avid basketball player in his youth, although 5 feet 2 inches. My father didn't seem to care that I felt no pull in that direction, and we never engaged in the traditional male bonding experiences, not even tossing a ball back and forth. He also never taught me any of his skills: carpentry, plumbing, painting, paper hanging, even shoe repair. He'd at one point apprenticed with a cobbler, although that had more to do with class than with gender. The way he saw it, I would grow up to be an important person who would have laborers to do those things for him. He was eager that I extricate myself from the working class and earn my pay from the comfort of a desk chair. He had no objections to my being a writer. He was a frustrated writer himself, who in 1948 had published an O. Henry-like sketch in a newspaper under the byline, Luke Sant. My mother never taught me her skills either, not even allowing anyone into the kitchen when she was cooking. But then her mother and her aunt had been legendary cooks, and she was forever made to feel like the graceless idiot daughter. Her repertoire of dishes was limited to recipes written down by her mother. Naturally, she would not have wanted to be observed in her daily race against failure. I'm certain my mother wanted me to be a girl. She struggled with the reality of her stillborn daughter, conflated the two of us, maybe wanted to effect some kind of magical transference. She feared men, probably with good reason, and would in any case have preferred someone like herself, as much as her girl cousins were like her, someone she could treat with the tenderness her own mother denied her. During our time together, when my father was at work, or when we were in Europe and he stayed behind working, I might just as well have been her daughter. I was quiet and timid and serious and cute, big dark brown eyes, wore a kerchief over my head when it was windy, and a little wool bonnet that tied under my chin when it was cold, wore a Peter Pan collared dickie with my duckling yellow sweater, and displayed my little knees year-round between short pants and socks. I can't say with any certainty just when the idea that I might or should be a girl first took hold, but it was probably around age 9 or 10, maybe. I was an imaginative and fearful child who saw omens everywhere. If I came across a pulp illustration of a note nailed to a tree saying, "You will die tonight," I was certain I would die that night. My mother's religion assisted this compulsion powerfully, of course. Any word or act could send one to hell. My mother had put a holy water font just inside the doorway of my room, and I knew that if I didn't cross myself with the water, every time I crossed the threshold, I would die that night. I was constantly pleading with Jesus not to kill me yet, just as I might ask him for a record player or a visit to an amusement park, or to spare the lives of my parents if they were late getting back from the store and therefore surely in a car crash, or to prevent my mother from killing me when I got a bad report card. At some point, there came the question of the ability of Jesus to turn me into a girl overnight, in my sleep. I don't remember whether Jesus proposed this or whether I requested it of him, but there it was, and it wouldn't leave me alone. I trembled from both desperate wishfulness and naked fear. I naturally regret my lost girlhood, yearn hopelessly for it, although I'm drawn up short when I actually imagine what being my parents' daughter would have been like once past age 12 or so. I already chafed under their rules as a boy. My clothes and hair were regulated until I was nearly 18. My mother searched my room on any pretext and read every bit of writing she found there. She wanted an account of everywhere I went and everyone I met. She was constantly warning me about bad companions when I obviously had no companions of any sort all through middle school. But winning a scholarship to a Jesuit high school in New York City was my ticket out of jail. That would not have happened if I had been a girl, and my parents' overprotectiveness would have been in full force for years longer. Would they even have allowed me to go to college out of state? Would I have had to get married to get away from them? When I was around 12, the principal of my school, a nun, scheduled a consultation for me with a psychologist. I was going through a difficult period with no friends and near daily fights in the schoolyard, serious enough that I dislocated various fingers. The other kids hated that I read books for fun and knew the answers in class. I still had a bit of an accent and was being treated for a stutter by a speech therapist. At my consultation, I was shown ink blots, given word associations, made to tell stories about pictures, the usual routine. When I was asked to draw a picture of a man and a woman and tell a story about them, I drew George and Martha Washington and gave a factual account of their lives. I thought that was extremely clever. After the test, the psychologist asked to speak privately with my parents. 20 minutes later, they stormed out, both of them furious. They wouldn't tell me what they'd learned. I just assumed he told them to ease up on the discipline and allow me more freedom, but who knows? It was right around then that I won the Arbor Day essay contest for my school. There was one winner from each of the schools in town. I was the only boy. When a photo of the 5 of us was published in the New Providence Dispatch, I appeared in the caption as Lucy Sante. Thank you.
So wonderful to hear that. We have 2 more readers left. And the first reader of our last 2 is Michael Waters. Michael is a freelance writer in Brooklyn and the author of The Other Olympians. Welcome, Michael.
Hi, I'm a member here, so I'm here all the time, so it's very weird to be on the other side of this stage. So a little quick backstory, so this is a queer history book. So they're letting me do nonfiction at Center for Fiction, thank God. And it came out last week, and basically all you need to know is that it's about the 1930s, and it's about these 2 athletes in particular, named Denne Kobeck, who is this Czech sprinter, and Mark Weston, who is this British shot putter, who in 1935 and 1936, they had these careers in women's sports, and then they announced that they're transitioning gender and that going forward, they're going to be living as men. And it becomes this like really big international news story. You have like sports magazines talking about them. You have Time magazine writing about them. Reporters are paying for the chance to photograph these athletes. This all really happened in like 1936. And sort of one thing I really want to do in this book is to situate them in queer community however I could, because, you know, if you know anything about the 1930s, there's not a lot of like queer media happening. And I did find this like one really funny like tabloid magazine, so this is just a section kind of about them and about how they covered these 2 athletes. As a teenager in Newcastle, Wyoming in the 1930s, far away from the bustle of cosmopolitan Europe, the future gay activist Elver Barker often drove into town with his friend to buy The Queerest Thing Around, a pulp publication called Sexology. Sexology was ostensibly a magazine of science. It took the reams of medical research on sex and sexuality and distilled them down so that regular people could understand. In an era in which mainstream newspapers referred to homosexuality only through euphemisms, Sexology was the one place many readers could encounter frank discussions about queer issues. For being a magazine of science, Sexology had a complicated relationship to evidence, at times letting sensationalism guide its editorial strategy. But its pop science ethos also helped it push boundaries. In the early 1930s, it published articles about whether homosexuals could conduct happy lives, or about women who lived together in pseudo-marriages. Queer people flocked to it. The United States didn't have a publication catering openly to the queer community, and hadn't since Chicago police shut down the short-lived gay newsletter, Friendship and Freedom, in 1924. Sexology was, in 1936, the closest analog to a gay magazine. Readers wrote into the Q&A section, offering a rare glimpse into the fabric of queer experience in 1930s America. One reader asked whether it was possible for a surgeon to construct an artificial vagina. The magazine responded that, yes, it was. Another wrote concerned that she was attracted to both sexes. Sexology counseled her not to worry, though it suggested that she focus on dating men. When sexology first reported on Kooke and Weston being these two athletes who transitioned, when sexology first reported on Kooke and Weston in August 1936, it noted that their gender transitions had proven, quote, intriguing to the general public, but it wanted to correct some misinformation. Quote, here we are undoubtedly dealing with an intersexual case, sexology wrote of Weston and Kooke. Quote, nature was uncertain as to her intentions while a baby was being formed, as to whether it should finally be man or woman. It would turn into a blockbuster story for the magazine. When Sexology published that first article on the two athletes, quote, a considerable number of readers were much stirred. As the magazine explained in a follow-up article, quote, some of them wrote and inquired whether the same could not be done for them. And if so, how should they go about it? What kind of surgical operations would they need, and who could they go to for more information? Letters poured in from across the United States, from trans and intersex people of all genders. The stories of Kooke and Weston prompted one person, whom the world perceived as a man, to ask Sexology, this is like a big block quote, could I live the balance of my life as a woman, as I have desired to be all my life? It seems to me that it would repay me for the years of suffering I have already put in. As I understand it, female sex hormones will cause the ability to give milk from the male breast. These are conditions which are foremost in my thoughts. I have always desired to be able to nurse a baby. Another letter that Sexology excerpted came from a reader who, despite being perceived publicly as a woman, wrote that, quote, there is nothing feminine about me. They asked, quote, would it not be advisable to undergo what operations are necessary to become the male I wish to be? Can you refer me to a competent surgeon who would be interested in my case? The outpouring of responses from readers baffled the editors of Sexology, who grasped at an explanation for why so many people were interested in transitioning gender themselves. The editors referred at least one reader, a textile worker from Alabama, whose story the historian Jules Gill Peterson has chronicled, directly to a medical expert for care. Quote, is this mere caprice? The magazine asked its audience. But the letters captured something else. The news was offering a lifeline to a heavily marginalized queer community, an alternate future with a different, more fluid understanding of gender. Stenya Kooke and Mark Weston each lived across the world from the mostly American readers of Sexology, but many saw themselves in the two men anyway. It is in the pages of Sexology that glimmers of a queer and trans embrace of Kooke and Weston surface. For people whose genders did not align with the ones that had been assigned to them at birth, Kooke and Weston may as well have been folk heroes, proof that transitioning and creating a new life were possible, even on a national stage. The letters written to Sexology are one small data point, but they suggest a second dimension to the importance of Kooke and Weston. The two athletes didn't just change the sports world. They also brought new attention and possibility to queerness itself. Anyone struggling with their own gender could look to these two athletes and feel a rush of relief. Perhaps they were not alone after all.
Okay, one more. Eric Schnall has worked. Yeah. Has worked on and off Broadway for 25 years and won a Tony Award as one of the producers of Hedwig and the Angry Inch. I Make Envy on Your Disco is his debut novel and won the Barbara D. Bernard Prize in Fiction. Welcome, Eric.
Hello. I have a little bit of imposter syndrome because I can't believe that I'm closing out the night with these amazing writers. I'm just really humbled to be here. I've been living with this book for a long time and am usually in my profession on the other side, so to be up here in front of you, I'm nervous. And I also just want to thank all the authors and the Center for Fiction for having us and for having me. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the book. It's I Make Envy on Your Disco. It takes place in Berlin in 2003. It's about a 37-year-old art advisor who is having a little bit of a coming of middle-age crisis and is trying to figure out his shit. He's got a boyfriend back in New York that he's been with for 7 years. Things have not been going so great lately. He's sensing the possibility of an infidelity, and he's over New York, he's over his profession, and so he takes the excuse of a gallery opening in Berlin, buys a plane ticket, and goes. He winds up in a hotel and basically shuts himself in his room for the first couple of chapters, doesn't go out, and slowly, as the book evolves, he comes out of his shell, and the first thing that he really does is go to a techno club. So Christina started us off with a scene in a club, and I'm gonna finish us off with a scene in a club with a with some drugs. So, okay. Since it's Saturday night and I'm in Germany, I decide to go to a club and hear some techno. Never mind that I haven't been out dancing in years, or that I now find myself listening to Light FM and enjoying the music in Starbucks. The clubs in Berlin have weird English names. Tonight, I must choose between Butter Club, Polar TV, and Delicious Donuts. Polar TV has the edge because it's been recommended by an artist back in New York who is 10 years younger than me and has a DJ, Woody, whom I've actually heard of. When I arrive, Polar TV looks like an enormous hut between a row of broken train tracks and an empty lot. It's drizzly and the wind is vicious, but there's a line at the door. The bass pounds from inside, the stairs shake as I climb them. I watch people show their IDs and panic that I don't have my passport. Then I remember that I'm 37 with flecks of silver in my hair, sparkles, Daniel calls them, which I always seem to forget. I don't get carded. I follow a group through a dimly lit corridor until we spill into the main room. My heart breaks just listening to the music and seeing everyone in their incredible fashions and silly haircuts, all of these young people with big smiles on their faces. DJ Woody is hunched over the turntable while a screen behind him flashes blue and white. The beat just repeats, and 100 people throw their hands in the air. The room quivers, the bass thumping from the center like a heartbeat. The disco ball gleams above the dance floor like an alien relic, the shining jewel of some galactic tomb. I buy a Coke and perch on a bench by the side of the dance floor. A beautiful girl with short brown hair and a white tank top sits next to me. I study her, the way her head rocks forward, then sways to the beat. She reaches over and grabs the bottle from my hand, takes a sip and returns it. I love this girl, the way that she wanted a sip of my Coke and she just took it. I hand her the bottle twice more because I want her to stay with me. I lean into her. What's your name? I ask her. She shrugs her shoulders and smiles. I'm Sam, I say. I'm Sam, she repeats, shrugging again. Sam? I point to myself. Sam. Aye, Sam, she laughs, then taps her chest. Uli. I extend my hand, but she grabs my shoulders and hugs me. I feel her cheeks soft and warm against my face. A boy, small, lithe, pale-skinned, sits down on the other side of me. He is long but miniature in his slinky jeans and tight black t-shirt, his eyes gazing sideways. There seem to be many serpentine boys slithering around Berlin, and that's fine by me. They all leave me breathless. The boy smokes, and I'm surprised at how happily I ingest the haze. Uli says something to him in German. He reaches over my lap, grabs her hand. For a few minutes, we just sit, their clasped hands resting on my thigh. The boyfriend takes a puff from his cigarette and puts his fingers on my back, tapping to the beat. Then he offers me a pill. You speak English, I ask? A little, he says. We introduce ourselves. His name is Marcus. Is it ecstasy, I ask him? Yeah, he nods. It is good, the tablet. You will take it, no? I begin to pull out my wallet, but he grabs my wrist. No, Marcus says, it is not necessary. He deposits the pill into my hand. This is Berlin. We are nice here. Thanks. I lean into him. The music is blaring. How old are you guys? Was, he shouts. I rephrase my question. What is your age? Ah. Marcus rests his chin on Uli's shoulder and translates. Uli looks at me, closes her hands, and opens all of her fingers. 10. She does this again. 10 more. I wait, but that's it. They are 20 years old. Was I this cute when I was 20? You can get away with anything at that age, but I only realize this now, after 3 more hands and 2 fingers have slipped away from me. Enjoy the tablet, Marcus says. He takes Uli by the hand and leads her to the dance floor. She blows me a kiss. I watch them dance, her hands on his waist, staring into each other's eyes. They move closer and start kissing. It's so beautiful and intimate that I look away. I find the bathroom, go into a stall, and examine the pill under the dim blue light. It's yellow with a Motorola logo imprinted on its top. I haven't taken ecstasy or done any drug in a long time. I used to be an expert on all the brands, BMWs, 007s, Smurfs, CK1s. I had my own ecstasy testing kit. I slept with some boy once just to get the name of his dealer and kept my pills in a velvet-lined box. But now I'm boring. I have no vices anymore. No cigarettes, no pot, no pills. Half a beer makes me sleepy. I'm usually in bed by 11 o'clock with my dog and my boyfriend, or my partner, my lover, whatever I'm supposed to call him. I decide to take only half of the pill. This seems to be my new thing lately. Half an Ambien, half caffeinated coffee, half naked sex with my boyfriend, or more often, half naked sex with myself. I go into the lounge and buy another Coke. I shield my mouth with my hand and bite the tablet straight down the middle. The taste is instantly familiar, synthetic, chemical, nostalgic. It has the bitter, artificial taste of laundry detergent. Daniel used to say that ecstasy tastes like the future, like space. I swallow it, take a sip of Coke, and put the other half in my pocket. Thank you.
Honestly, I could just sit up here all night. Thank you for that. And thank all of you for sharing your really incredible work with us this evening. It was very queer, very messy, but in a good way. And a perfect way to kind of close out maybe the first half of Pride Month. So, okay, I am pretty sure that the readers from the second half will have the chance to sign books out there, right? Yes, they will. And I think possibly the readers from the first half might be signing some stock. So hang around and talk to Melanie. Is there anything else I need to, like any other housekeeping announcements? Come back. Thank you for being here. We love the Center for Fiction. It's iconic. Come back. And good night.